President Biden is set to defend his economic record in what the White House is calling a major economic speech due to be given in Chicago later this morning. Joining us right now with a preview is Heather Boushey. She is a member of the President's Council of Economic Advisors. And Heather, what can we expect to hear later today?
Well, today the president is going to outline his vision for the U.S. economy. He's been talking for a long time about he's working to build an economy from the middle out and bottom up, and he's going to lay out that economic argument. I mean, here's the thing. The core pieces of the president's economic agenda are to make sure that we're making investments all across this country in things like infrastructure, but also in strategic industries like clean energy and new technologies like semiconductors that are so important to both our national and economic security, and making sure that we're doing so in a way that is empowering the private sector. You know, we talk about how that's government-led, private sector enabled. So investments all across the country, that's thing one. Thing two is empowering workers and making sure that they have the education and skills to be able to thrive in this economy, make sure they have that opportunity. So that's the second piece. And of course, you know, the president likes to say that he's the most pro-union president in decades, and he'll talk about that as well, the important role that unions play. And then third, making sure that the economic landscape is competitive and fair. And this has been a priority of the president since early in the administration with his whole of government competition executive order, making sure that the way that our economy works, it allows small businesses to thrive, allows workers to thrive, and allows the best of American innovation to reach the marketplace. So those are the three key points that he's going to talk about in terms of his Bidenomics, how we're growing the economy from the bottom up and middle out. And he's going to contrast that with the way that Republicans have focused on the economy with their trickle-down economics and, you know, with tax cuts that primarily benefit those at the top but don't lead to the kind of economic growth that we need to see that can benefit people all across this country.
Heather, I'm not sure if you know Greg Ip from the Wall Street Journal. I'm guessing you do. I've known him for over 25 years. Greg is a straight shooter. He is nonpartisan. He is somebody who focuses on economics and how things work. And he's got an article in today's Wall Street Journal that lays out things very well with the two records that the president has when it comes to Bidenomics, when it comes to his economic plan. The first are the successes that he's already had legislatively, that he had very early on when it came to things like infrastructure and when it came to things like semiconductor production, renewable energy. That's one side of it. The other side of it, though, is the huge amount of money that was spent, $1.9 trillion laid out to do some of these things, and the after effects that has had, that Greg, I think, rightly points out, have led to a lot of the inflation that we are continuing to deal with, and that has been a much tougher mar on Bidenomics, on what's happened with his economic plan. What do you say to the argument that, look, the American record is a tough one with the American Rescue Plan, and that it caused some of the inflation that has meant that the average worker, until very recently, was not making more money. They were making more money, but not in real terms when you consider inflation.
Well, so I have a number of reactions to that. Let me go through some of the economic data that's so important. So first of all, you know, when the American Rescue Plan was put into place, folks, the Congressional Budget Office and others thought that it would take us years to get the unemployment rate back down to below 4%. Of course, we did that within the first year of this administration, and we have seen historically low levels of rates of unemployment. We have seen the president have an addition of 13.1 million jobs on his watch. We have seen month after month of strong job gains for people all across this country, and we've seen real wages outpacing inflation. We have seen that inflation certainly has been a challenge. That has been a challenge not just in the United States, but globally. But we've also seen significant progress on that. We've seen the inflation rate come down by over half over the last 11 months. We have seen that because of the work of this administration, supply chains have become unsnarled, which has allowed prices to become more normal in many markets across the country. And of course, the root cause of this inflation was the global pandemic. And then, of course, Putin's war in the Ukraine that upended global energy prices. And now that we have been dealing with the issues around the pandemic, that is, you know, we're moving past that. We've unsnarled those supply chains, and energy prices, of course, have come back down. And of course, we watch those very carefully. But we need to remember that this is a global phenomenon, but the United States has performed much better than our other folks that have also experienced these same trends. So our inflation has not been ahead of the pack, but we have seen stronger economic growth. And that is what has been benefiting families all across this country. The other thing I would note is that families are doing much better on many metrics than they were pre-pandemic. When you look at the number of families that are falling behind on their mortgages, for example, or you look at bankruptcies, family household net worth is doing better than it was pre-pandemic. And indeed, people are saying that they are happy with their jobs. There was a new survey that actually, I believe, came out in the Wall Street Journal that said that job satisfaction was at these record highs. So we need to put all of the pieces together. Certainly, the president has prioritized inflation, but what he has prioritized as well is making sure that we get this economy back on track, we get people back into jobs, we provide that economic security so that families can thrive, and doing so in a way that's allowing American business to thrive with the massive investments that we've seen across the country because of that suite of legislative policies that the president has put into place. We are now up to I believe $490 billion of private sector investment all across the country to do those investments in semiconductors and clean energy.